would you mind starting this out a little bit? Just kind of give a little bit of introduction of yourself, kind of your own kind of profile a little bit, what you've been working on, and then maybe, how we met.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Bruckner Chase, and I have most recently been working on a nonprofit foundation called Ocean Positive that we formed a few years ago after making a visit to American Samoa with NOAA's National Marine Sanctuaries. And that was kind of a calling to take what I'd known from being in the corporate world for so long and try to apply it to something that would basically improve the health, well-being, quality of life of communities that we were connecting with, and kind of focused on coastal communities and a little bit of the conservation of our oceans and our natural environments. It was a long path across many years to kind of get to that point. I had a much more traditional beginning, both in high school and college, and went on to work in the corporate world for a long time with companies like Abercrombie and Fitch, Performance Bicycle Shop, West Marine, and then had my own project management firm that did retail development around the country. So I had a very traditional corporate sort of background, working for the man, so to speak.
Okay.
And took that knowledge of how to build something that was sustainable. I mean, I believe that looking at return on investment, looking at 3-year, 5-year plans from the private sector served me well when I decided to kind of look at ways to build sustainable programs that perhaps had a little bit more of a social or environmental component to them. Not a little bit more, but we're started with that focus, that how do we take this information that I've accumulated and apply it to something that's a little bit more of a social endeavor. I don't want to speak poorly of the company that I used to work for, but I used to joke that with Abercrombie and some other companies, I was basically making the world safe to buy another T-shirt. And as I was exposed to more opportunities to do more with what I knew and with what experiences I had had, I felt that I needed to take the leap into a little bit more of a social focused, not entrepreneurship, but a social focus for my entire life. So really kind of living, breathing, and working this.
Now, how did that, was there something that happened that caused that pivot for you, or like why?
Yeah, actually, and my pivot is probably more dramatic than most people's, or could be. At least it came out of, I had this athletic passion. I've been an endurance athlete my entire life and had been living in Santa Cruz in Northern California for a while and kind of gotten into long distance, marathon distance swimming. So, swims that were lasting 8, 10, 12, 14 hours in length. And a few years back, I had decided I wanted to swim across Monterey Bay, which is from Santa Cruz to Monterey. It's about a 25 to 28 mile swim across one of the most amazing bodies of water I've ever been in. It's a immense submarine canyon that comes all the way up to the shore. You cannot, there's everything there, from whales to sharks to otters to surfers to commercial fishermen. It's one of the largest marine protected areas under the National Marine Sanctuary System.
Wow.
And I wanted to go and explore it. And exploring it for me meant getting in the water in Santa Cruz at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning and pushing off in the dark and swimming towards Monterey Bay. And I did that with Monterey Bay Aquarium and the Seafood Watch program, and also with the NOAA National Marine Sanctuary program to launch the Blue Ocean Film Festival. And the intent was, this film festival was talking about these stories of coastal communities and ocean environments around the world. And we were going to explore and literally dive into this amazing marine protected area right back behind the venue for the film festival. And what we thought was going to be a relatively straightforward, if that can be described, for swimming for 14 and a half hours in 58-degree water, turned out to be just this epic sort of adventure. We, one of the support boats had to pull away at one point to go identify where a entangled blue whale needed to be assisted. We ran into jellyfish within the first mile of the swim, which we then saw for the next 27 miles, being stung and swimming through schools of jellyfish that like nothing any of us had seen before. And that includes the scientists from National Marine Sanctuaries that said they'd never seen that heavy of a mass of jellyfish. So 14 hours of being stung by jellyfish, rescuing blue whales, finding out later that there was a tagged great white shark named Frodo who was swimming around.
Nice.
Yeah, Frodo. Yeah. Tagged at the Farallones, and Frodo was kind of on the same course that we were on. So stood up on the beach after swimming and started talking about the amazing things that we'd experienced out there. A lot of it was painful, but then you also look at the fact that the jellyfish bloom that was going on there also indicated an ocean that wasn't in balance.
Yep.
That the only other person to have done the swim did it 30 years before, and their record showed they saw these sunfish or mola mola. Well, sunfish eat jellyfish, just as one small example.
Okay.
We saw no sunfish, no mola mola. And the environment had changed a lot in the 30 years since they had done the swim. So when we look at jellyfish often as an indicator that some things may be out of whack, it opened up a whole depth of conversation about these marine protected areas and how we connect to them and what the experience is like, whether you're standing in ankle deep water or in 3,000 feet of water in the middle of Monterey Bay. And I knew when I stood up on that beach and was talking to reporters and people both locally and nationally that I thought life was probably going to change from this point forward, and it pretty much did. About a year later is when I went to American Samoa and began working down there with their coastal communities and villages, and that's been a real focus of a lot of the work I've done for the last few years. But Monterey Bay, standing up on that sand after getting across that bay, was pretty much it for life as I knew it.
Now, was your trip to Samoa connected to that swim? How did you end up going over there?
Yeah, so the National Marine Sanctuary in the United States oversees what is called marine protected areas. In the US, they're called National Marine Sanctuaries, basically underwater national treasures or national parks. And some of them are relatively small. There's one off of the Carolinas that's basically surrounding the Monitor, which is a shipwreck. So these areas can be coral reefs or marine heritage sites. And one of the sanctuaries, the most remote one, is American Samoa. At the time I went down there, it was just one bay in American Samoa called Whangateli Bay. It's since been expanded to cover, I think, in excess of 10,000 square miles now. But I went down there at the request of National Marine Sanctuaries because while this is an amazing culture and community, there were issues with drownings and with disconnects between the community and the ocean from a safety perspective. And as an ocean lifeguard and swimmer, the intent was to go down there. I ended up doing a swim that no one had ever done before between two islands in American Samoa, about a 11-mile swim from the island of Aunuu to the main island of Tutuila and Utule Beach. And it kind of ran along the entire shore of Tutuila, the larger island. And while we were there, we did a lot of outreach and youth programs and began training with the Marine Patrol and Department of Public Safety. And what was supposed to be just a 10-day trip to kind of raise awareness of the importance of our connection to the oceans, both on its impact on the health of the oceans, but also the health of the community. We ended up with a request from the governor to see about establishing an ongoing program there to empower the people in the village to build new capacity to utilize the ocean, to strengthen the community, both from an economic standpoint, health, well-being, as well as preventing drownings or preventable drownings, and training Department of Public Safety. So this whole protective network that grew out of what was supposed to be just a one swim. And so we kind of ran with that. And that was the starting point for forming the nonprofit foundation and beginning to work under a government grant to do the work in American Samoa.
So I want to ask you a question in there, but before I do, just give a sketch of the nonprofit.
So Ocean Positive, and as we looked at,
which, by the way, I got my
yeah,
I love it.
So it was really important when we we're looking at a federal grant that we needed a nonprofit 501c3 because we wanted to work independently and not necessarily be underneath a larger umbrella organization. So we spent a lot of time thinking about the name and then the mission statement, because it had to really resonate, because we were going to marry ourselves to this, and did it reflect what we believed was important for communities and oceans and personal and community empowerment. So Ocean Positive has a mission statement to positively impact how we all feel, think, and act towards our oceans and our communities. And every word that is part of that mission statement was very deliberate in its choosing. We didn't want to change someone because we knew that we would meet people that actually resonated with us, that were already there with us. So we wanted to focus on positively impacting it. And I think part of positively impacting something also kind of goes hand in hand with making it a sustainable impact as well. Rather than focusing on just one event or one interaction, how do we make a sustainable positive impact on an individual level, on a village level, city level, or make that an even larger geographic footprint, looking at countries as a whole? So that's the structure, and we've kept it relatively small as far as infrastructure, and developed really strong partnerships so that we can pull in resources that are important to the specific needs of that area. We've always talked about three main things need to come together to make a sustainable initiative or program, and that's knowledge, means, and desire. That no matter how strong someone's desire is to take on a new challenge, or to move and get a new job, or change careers, if they don't have the knowledge base of how that can happen, or if they don't have the means. So in American Samoa, a remote coastal community, if they want to establish a village-based lifeguard agency, that's an incredible desire that can have a positive impact. But if they don't have access to the means to do that, the safety equipment, the training, then that idea only stays as an idea. So Ocean Positive recognizes the need to pull those things together. Find the people with the knowledge that you need, find the people with access to the means or the suppliers of the means, and that may be different things to different programs, and then the desire. And sometimes people may not know what they don't know. They don't know what they need, or they have passion for a change or something that needs to happen in a different way for them. So how do we begin to shape that raw desire into something that can actually be sustainable for them or the people that they want to impact?
So, well, I'm going to just pick on that. I'm really fascinated with this knowledge, means, and desires. So what I hear in that, and so one of the things that has been important to me in our work, especially with Wellboat Bikes, has been, it's around this question of access. Like, I actually think that we worked with folks in need in so many ways, and a lot of like this kind of deeper issue behind those needs really is often access. Like so I heard this great, everyone uses that cliche, like, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach him how to fish, he eats for a lifetime. But like, if you don't have access to the pond, it doesn't matter if you've learned how to fish. Right. So like there is this, and there are often systems in place that keep people from having access, but then there's often just something as easy as like what we're doing is a tool to get you from here to there, like the right tool, the right supplies, the right things. I don't know if I'm just curious if you can elaborate a little bit on, like, you've traveled around, you've worked with a lot of different communities. I'm sure a diversity of needs. Even framing desire, I imagine, often grows out of need and often grows out of want, right? Like,
right.
There are different ways that maybe hunger or desire can be grown, but the connecting. So really, it sounds like there's a bit of bridge building in what you're doing. And I don't know, just talk to me about that process of the challenge of access, the shapes that it takes, the ways that you encounter it.
It's really good. And one of the things that's really important in forming our nonprofit and working with other nonprofits, as well as government agencies and private sectors, a lot of times people have really good intentions, that we want to do this for someone. But so much is driven by that desire cannot be driven. Success cannot be just a great social media post or a great Facebook photo or a great video. We work with NOAA and the National Weather Service on increasing safety within the community by shaping individual choices so we don't have people ended up as second victims in drownings and stuff. And we always talk about how if we want to, it's one thing to make an impression, to have someone see what you're doing or to hit them once, but how do you actually change behavior? I mean, people may have a desire to do something, but in order to make that habitual change, how do you keep reconnecting with them and keep reinforcing that positive desire? And much of what we do and what drives our program is the fact that my wife, Michelle, who's worked with you a fair bit, is a social scientist. So she has her PhD from Penn in the School of Social Policy and Practice. And she originally focused on adolescent brain development and looking at the neuroscience of risk-taking behavior and how young people make choices and how emotional drive can shape that decision-making process.
Yep.
And from that starting point, she also teaches and focuses on really a scientific sort of approach of analyzing and looking at current and existing studies and tracking impact. And she has really taken that social science lens and applied it to what we do. So it's not just, how many likes did we have on a video, but how is this being embedded in the individual or in the community so that it continues to grow and nurture. We talk about how someone has a desire to do something, but often that desire needs to be met with ongoing work, and that can be exhausting. You've started your foundation, Well Built Bikes. It's one thing to have the desire to get up in the morning and do it, but to have that same desire 90 days later or 120 days later or 365 days later. So how do we, nurture with success and with connections and often social connections to people to kind of enrich that desire, and looking at not allowing individuals to feel isolated in these positive changes they want to implement. So building community connections is very important to us. And working, for one instance, in American Samoa, and it's probably very similar for you, working with specific populations in Tampa, is how do we take and recognize the strength that is in that community, the power that community has right now, and not replace that or come in as saying, no, this is the way you've got to do it, but marry what we know about what works in other places and skill sets and marry that to the cultural community relevance of what they're facing on a daily basis. So I think most of us can agree that there are accepted best practices of this is the best way to perform a rescue in the ocean. There's international standards for training lifeguards. Use this method, whether it's swimming or paddling or performing a rescue. That's a knowledge base that's pretty much going to be the standard for the most part anywhere you run into waves in ocean. But how that is taught and how that becomes embedded in a community, we need to recognize, we need to meet individuals and communities with where they're starting. We can't just hold something up here and go, good luck, but how do we take what we know, meet them where they are, and then come up to the level that we want to be at, that everyone may want to be at.
How did you, tell me about developing that lesson, like over time. So, did you just have a really good teacher that told you not to go into a community, and did you not screw that up, or is that a hard won lesson? Cause you're right. This is a community development practice that is fundamental to working with any community, really, especially a community that experiences vulnerability or cultural differentiation, where there needs to be a leveraging of, like you said, the strengths and assets of the existing community, the leadership of the existing community. And hearing you say that is beautiful. And I want to affirm it, but I also want to go, you didn't start there, did you?
It's a really good question. And I tell people of all, I mean, they see like 28-mile swim or all this other stuff that I do in the ocean. They form an idea of what that person must be. And I tell them that the only thing I'm really good at is I'm really good at being afraid, period. That
Really?
no matter how many times I stand on the beach or stand on the ocean, I still have to go through that self-check of going, I'm going out into an environment that I need to have the utmost respect for because anything can happen. And I was rescued from drowning twice before the age of 10. And I remember what it's like to be afraid to go into the ocean more than waist deep. I remember what it was like to be afraid to go somewhere where someone said, oh, there might be sharks. I remember what it's like to be afraid of jellyfish. I still don't like them very much, but I've had some close personal experiences with them. So that fear has been shaped. And I think that when we were teaching people how to instruct others, we focus on strength-based peer mentoring sort of development. And I tell people it's not important to just learn what we're teaching, but remember how you learned it. Remember what it was like to not know what to do. Remember what it was like to kind of be a little afraid to take on something new. And I think for whatever reason, maybe because I've put myself from a young age into experiences in which I wasn't the one that everyone knew. I lived abroad when I was in high school and wasn't, I was in an environment where I just didn't know where I stood or who I was. And I spent most of my life just trying to discover it. I've always thought that I wasn't the guy that did those things. I wasn't the athlete. I've never perceived myself as that. So now when I look back at it and often see how other people see that, it's like how, that's not how I see myself. And so I think that I've always felt vulnerable. And so maybe that sense of internal vulnerability has allowed me to have a level of empathy for others that might feel that same way. I think also, and I can't dismiss the fact that, and I've told you, if I ever sound smart when I'm talking to someone, I'm probably plagiarizing my wife, the PhD in social science. So
yeah, like I got all my good ideas from her. Yeah, that's good.
I cannot dismiss the fact that being around someone with that type of lens and focus and filter on communities and individuals, that impacts my decision making. It impacts positively how I see others. And I think I've been really lucky. I've had mentors and guides throughout my life, but I've always told young people that embrace every experience that even feels a little bit uncomfortable, that challenges you a little bit. Because while that specific instance may not ever happen again, what you learn from that experience or how that shaped your decision-making process or your perception of yourself may pay off for you in ways that you could never possibly imagine at all. I mean, I went to a private prep all boys school in Tennessee, extremely conservative and not at all where you would expect to find in Tennessee, on the banks of the Mississippi River. You wouldn't expect to find, the guy that's teaching you how to be safe in coastal communities all over the world on the banks of the Mississippi River looking over soybean fields and cotton fields.
Yep.
So I think the path there was recognizing and chasing things that felt fulfilling and not being afraid to get outside of a comfort zone and really immerse yourself in the opportunities to learn from wherever you land.
God, it's also rich, man. Chasing things that feel fulfilling. I'm curious. So, okay, I just heard this the other day. I heard it, and as soon as I did, it was like it's related to sales. And someone ran through this. They had a sales training, and they're like, "Oh, did you ever hear this?" I was like, "No." And as soon as I heard it, I was like, "Oh, that's like definitely a thing. Like if I put those words into Google, I'm gonna see like." And sure enough, it's. So you may be familiar with it, but it's interesting because when I heard it, I was like, "This is a sales technique, but it's really like good psychology." It seemed like. So you ever heard feel, felt, found? Have you ever heard that?
No.
Me neither. So I hadn't until like just a couple days ago. So you, and as you just told that story, which was really illustrating why and how you have empathy, which is what I think this thing really is. It's like here's a script for empathy. I understand that you feel afraid. I understand that I know and understand that you feel X, Y, Z.
Mm-hmm.
So you're heard and I understand. I have also felt afraid. Others have felt afraid. You're not alone in your fear or your feelings. I have mustered up the strength to wade into the water. Others have done the same. And what they have found is the lesson you were trying to get at, which isn't now not coming from you, but a collection of people who were afraid. Right. And I was like, God, that's really brilliant. And like, yeah, sure. That's a clever way to like get past someone's like objection to buying something, which is like, yeah, it's a sales tactic, but it also sounds like a way to be a good friend. Yeah. And it's funny, like in what you're saying, I'm like, oh, you're going, I work with people that might be scared and I know what it is to be afraid. And therefore and when I work with people, how to work with others, I tell them, hey, remember what it was like when you didn't know this thing or you hadn't learned this thing. Like you're kind of cursed with knowledge now that you have it. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to remember what it's like to not have that, to not have succeeded in that or not have accomplished that. So one of the things you mentioned early on, so the jellyfish, you're swimming through miles of jellyfish.
Yeah.
Well, apart from that being just a horrific,
it was a nightmare. It was probably physically and mentally. I had tried to swim the year before and been overcome by the jellyfish after.
Same thing, man.
Same thing. My body, the venom built up in the system and it was just shutting down. And
so for someone that doesn't know what a jellyfish does to you, what is it doing?
So the jellyfish venom, and I ran into several different species of jellyfish. I can recognize them now by the level of pain and how the some brush, some wrap around you, and
bodied knowledge.
Yeah, but the tentacles hit your skin and then inject venom into your skin, and that venom, one hit from a jellyfish, unless you're allergic to it, is probably just going to hurt, and then it's going to kind of go away, unless it's something like a box jelly or something that'll kill you in 30 minutes. But most jellyfish, it's not one sting, but when you start adding multiple stings, the venom builds up in your system and it begins to have the cumulative effect of what it does when a jellyfish is trying to hit its prey, which is, begins to immobilize the prey, paralyze the prey, slow down or stop heart rate, the whole thing. Just things start to mess with your body's internal functions. And so I had been stung so many times that first year with no protection whatsoever that my body was just starting to shut down. I had never gotten cold in water before like that, and I was shivering. The skin had gone like gray. And so the venom builds up in your system. It's like one bee sting's not bad, but if you get swarmed by a bunch, it's a whole nother dangerous situation. So that's what I was going through in the water. And the second year I put on a suit to protect me a little bit, which meant that I was just getting stung in the face, mouth, hands, feet, and other places for 14 hours.
Now, there's a question I'll maybe easing into with this, but like I'm really interested in this jellyfish thing. So like because in there is a way in which it's like that is seemingly like, I just think of doing something that you just want to stop, right? And continuing. And I guess this is a big part of the mental component of being an endurance athlete in general, and then being in jellyfish in particular. But like, so there's something like a muscle that you've had to have built to be able, like mental muscle that you've built to be able to do that. That is not like you wanted to stop.
Yeah. And I would say that there is, you see so many, I guess with YouTube and social media, everyone is celebrating or everyone wants to celebrate how they were the first, the fastest, the longest, the hardest, the best, the strongest. And in my experience, having really been embracing the demons that go on long before you get to celebrate a finish line, I think that for me, the first year that I tried to do the swim and did not make it across, swam for about 7 hours or something like that, I remember conditions were glassy. I mean, it was, as a swimmer, it could not have been better. There was not a ripple in the water, dense fog, which means you couldn't see anything. So we were 10 miles offshore and you couldn't see more than 100 meters. Of course, we had a boat with us that was on navigational systems, but you couldn't see anything. I mean, it was glass. I mean, if I picked my head up, it was glass. I put my head down in the water and it was a nightmare. I mean, it was like swimming through an exhibit at an aquarium, but they were bigger. I mean, these jellyfish were bigger than the kayak. And I think that I remember that first year being angry, going, this isn't fair. This should not be happening. I trained for this. I'm doing this for a good cause. I'm trying to raise awareness about the ocean and all this. This isn't fair. This shouldn't be happening. I remember being angry, and I remember being disappointed with myself as I reflected back on that later. And my wife was like, you didn't fail. You didn't fail. No one could have overcome that. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Long before my body had succumbed, my mind had already broken. That I was angry at the conditions. It was unfair. It wasn't right. And I realized as I trained for that second year to go back into what could be exactly the same thing, that I couldn't swim faster. It didn't matter. I could be fitter, and I was, but if I had that same sort of disconnect in how I responded to the environment, whatever it gave me, I was not going to make it. And I remember in that second year, being stung, and the sun had just come up, and there's jellyfish all around me, and I'm kind of pushing my way through them. And I look over and I see this ray, like just hovering about 3 feet deep in the water, looking right at me. So I've got these jellyfish all around me that are beautiful, I mean, stunning. And this ray, just huge, just looking at me as I swam past. And I remember thinking, this is absolutely beautiful. And what an amazing experience. I'm still being stung, just like the year before. It's still actually an even denser jellyfish school than we'd seen before. But I was at peace with it because I was playing my part in it. They were playing their part, and we were just going to let it go and keep doing what we could to reach success as that event defined, which is getting to the beach, to share the story of all the things that were going on out there. And I coach athletes and I tell them, there's 2 W's that you need to be prepared for in any sort of challenging endeavor, whether it's an endurance event or just getting through the week. And the first one is, why am I here? And the second one is, when is this going to be over? So, and I think that in that second year, I knew why I was there, and I knew that I was a part of this. I wasn't separating myself from it, come what may. And then that mental switch really was something that I kind of learned through practice. And I would suggest now that as important as my physical training now is a mindfulness meditation practice. 30 minutes of a guided mindfulness meditation has the same sort of residual effects on how my brain functions in high stress situations as running on a regular basis changes the mitochondrial density and my muscles' ability to process oxygen. That residual effect of training my brain and the residual effect of physically training my body each day, when I combine those two, it means that things can still happen, but I have a better control of how I respond to those high stress situations and create a better likelihood of my own success. And it might be that I redefine success in the process as well. That often the goal I set out for myself may not be, there may be something better that the universe has in mind for me. And when I arrive at where I'm supposed to be, that becomes the powerful, authentic story that's mine, that might allow me to feel, felt, and shape others.
Man, that's so good. Chasing those things that feel like there's purpose. And I think that why is super central. When is it going to be over? That's just funny. Tell me about, so you said you're practicing mindfulness meditation and there's a mental switch, and you illustrated. So in one of those, you had something like anger and resentment toward just the universe in a way, like this isn't fair. This is like, and you said I'd broken mentally. And then you contrasted that in the next swim where you're like, I'm in a very similar situation, but it's beautiful and gratitude. And what is so we talk, and this is all like, the amount of things you're saying that I want to like drill down into, but I'm going to allow them to, like, let's just leave them implicit. I hope the value of work coming out like in all of this is like what we're here to talk about, but the internal work, like what has been your process internally that led you to meditation, that helped you to transition from anger and resentment to gratitude? Because this isn't just applicable to swimming with jellyfish, right? Like getting through the week, or just for everyone listening, like what might be the easy first steps that lead to the hard, deep work, maybe.
Right. And I think that, you can read books about flow, and they talk about athletes getting into this flow state where things are just natural and flowing. And, that's one thing, but with me, it was not just finding this flow, but the emotional response to a situation that could make what happens next, dangerous. So my chosen realm of practice is the ocean, which can be extremely dangerous. I mean, from waves to currents to wildlife, it is inherently a very dangerous environment if you're not prepared for what could happen out there. And I think that there's no other path. The mindfulness meditation as a process came to me because that was Michelle's original area of study, looking at mindfulness meditation as a tool to prevent recidivism with incarcerated youth, and looking at how, when a young person is released from the juvenile facility and goes back to the same environment that they were in, how they may respond to situations in their neighborhood may be what landed them in the detention center in the first place. And if they respond the same way again, they'll end up back in that detention facility. So is there a way to recognize risk-taking behavior and brain development and choice making? And at what age, or any age, can mindfulness meditation, so that when we're facing an emotionally charged situation, whether it's a person confronting you on the street or a wave confronting you in the ocean, how do you adopt kind of a non-judgmental, real-time awareness of the situation, and maybe teach yourself to react so that it doesn't create an adverse situation that ends up with either being incarcerated, if you're talking about, the juvenile justice system and youth, or in my case, getting hurt or killed by whatever's going on out there. I'm also an ocean lifeguard, so I'm charging into situations in which someone else might be drowning or die, literally. And it's two individuals going into the exact same situation. And I tell the lifeguards that I work with, the most important tool you bring with you into the ocean is not the rescue tube, the board, or your physical training. It's your state of mind. It is your decision-making process in that high-stress situation in which someone else feels they are going to die. And you're about to interact with that person in an environment that's going to be challenging at the very least, probably. And so I think that with me, the mindfulness meditation has been able to shape and strengthen something that I probably just began to recognize because I've been doing so many of these challenging endeavors for so long that I probably worked through some of the process on my own. But then the mindfulness meditation practice gave it shape and much more power. if you look at, for one instance, like, in an ocean situation, I train a lot of athletes, and you'll see them standing on the beach looking out at the first buoy that's out past the waves and past the break. And for the most part, there are exceptions, but the safest place to go or to move to when you've got a wave coming at you is straight into it. And so if you wait right there for the wave to hit you, it's going to hit you. Whereas the safest place to be, for me, for the most part, is going towards the wave with some speed and a deliberate approach, and then often going under or over it to let the wave wash over you, to let the power not impact you the way it can, so that you can confront that situation. And often the safest place for me is not running away from the wave, but going straight at it with a plan to not be negatively impacted by it.
God, that's so good. Man, what a great concrete example of just how to deal with life.
It's funny, Tennessee, right? I mean, I didn't grow up in San Diego. I didn't grow up in Honolulu, but Tennessee. But for whatever reason, the environment that scared the hell out of me when I was a kid is the environment that I think has taught me the most about how to roll with stuff that you just absolutely cannot control. On a regular basis, I am out in an environment in which I have no control whatsoever, except how I respond.
So, okay. So I've been thinking a lot about temperament and how individual temperaments impact or affect, like even the makeup of teams or whatever. And so one of the questions, there's a couple questions I have about that. One of them is you talk about training lifeguards or folks that need to be able to go into that situation. And you say the most important thing is not the buoy or whatever you're bringing out there, the tools, it's your mindset. How much, like if you were recruiting for that job, or like, is there something you're looking for in an individual that you're like, this is going to make a good lifeguard beyond the skill set, which can be trained?
Mm-hmm.
And then how much do you find in, like, maybe you're training people you didn't recruit that you can, like, just talk to me about temperament as it relates to this task where mindset is so central.
It's a good question. And I also have the benefit, I've gotten a chance to work with a lot of U.S. Coast Guard rescue swimmers and be around that program a lot. And, that's one of the most challenging special operations schools that you can go into, a school in Elizabeth City, where they're taking people and teaching them how to be, the world's best ocean rescuers. And I think that I'm reflecting back, because there's the reality of guarding miles and miles of mid-Atlantic beaches with millions of people coming down and needing to have warm bodies to blow a whistle and kind of keep things under control. And then there's also, when things do go wrong, how do you make sure that, the lifeguard doesn't get injured and the people that need to be saved or protected are protected. And I think that the temperament that I would look for, especially looking at rookies or potential, athletes trying out, is that there needs to be, and we tell people that the most important thing you can do is respect the ocean. The Samoan phrase is fa'alualo I levasa. So respect the ocean. It's not be afraid of, but respect it. And I think that comes with respect, comes a little bit of humility. And I think that I see so many people think that they can muscle their way or power their way through anything. And I think that that's that raw power. And I think that with training this temperament, it's basically, you kind of approach kind of a strength-based mentoring sort of, it's a mentoring sort of process that for some people, they won't necessarily be able to kind of respect that. But if they're going to do the job and do it well for any period of time, that's what's going to need to evolve. But by the same token, we'll have a lot of 16, 17, 18-year-old kids come out. They'll sit the beach for a year. They'll be on the stand. They'll keep everything safe and they'll move on. And, that's one level. But then those that have been doing it for a longer period of time, that have been in some situations that have been more challenging. It's that trait, that temperament is humility and respect. And I think that, I tell people, you want to let the water do the work, that there are going to be situations in which you cannot just power through them, that no amount of physical or mental strength will allow you to just power through certain things, that often, how do you work with it? Here's another example. If you go and look at the messaging from NOAA and the National Weather Service about rip currents, they're like, stay away from rip currents. Rip currents will kill you. Rip currents are dangerous. Stay away. They issue rip current warnings. That's true. And that's exactly right. As a lifeguard, if I see someone in trouble beyond the waves, I'm going to look for that rip current, because I know that rip current that we tell everyone else is dangerous, in this instance,
it's the right tool.
Where I need to go, that rip current will take me out to that person faster.
Yep.
And so allowing that knowledge and wisdom to kind of recognize opportunities to work within a system and with a system or with a community rather than trying to fight it. And I think that is how everyone survives and thrives.
So this is really good. And it brings me back to the initial reason I wanted to circle back to jellyfish. So the reason was, you said, well, there was a lot of jellyfish, more jellyfish than we had seen. And was it sunfish that would eat jellyfish?
Molo. Yeah, but sunfish. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it reminded me, are you familiar with permaculture?
No.
So permaculture it's kind of a philosophy that most people would know as it relates to gardening or growing food. So, but it kind of is, the philosophy bleeds into every area of life. But basically, it's like, look, you go plant your garden and you plant all of your one crop in a row, and you put your carrots here and your lettuce here or whatever. And permaculture would just basically say, hey, go look at the woods and go look around in nature. Nothing is growing that way, and there's a reason for that. And it's basically a study in natural ecosystems that thrive. And so it says, look, there is a way that so the word is like that there is culture that can be permanent, sustainable, right? It's a philosophy of sustainability, and there's kind of a wheel in that, which I can't like flesh out for you, and it doesn't matter. But I was in it, so I've been very interested in that one because we do community gardens, but the other, because I think permaculture overlaps with some of it is a good collection of a lot of the values that I and my community have, like it resembles, right? So I'm like, oh, we're into permaculture, or building a well-built culture that can last, right? A culture that would endure and is good for life, sustaining life and thriving. And it was interesting because one of the things I remember in a class, I went to like a little workshop on that, and someone had, I don't know, some kind of bug in their fields. And they're like, I have a problem with these bugs. And they were like, you don't have a bug problem. You have a turkey deficit. And actually, if you just you introduce some turkeys who eat those bugs, this will be a more balanced ecosystem. And it stood out in what you said. You're like, there is jellyfish, and because there's so many jellyfish, it's a sign that there's some problem, some imbalance, some dysfunction in the ecosystem. And then, as you just talked about, kind of respecting the ocean, and you're like, you circle back to like a balanced system in working with communities even. And I don't know, I'd like to hear you muse a little bit on, because I hear in your work, like, as you talk about what it is you do, it's like, it is about, like, it sounds like you are in the business of ecosystem, in community, village, ocean. And so I don't know, what does that sound like? Does that sound about right? That there is something about like balance and ecosystem at the heart of your work?
I think so. I think that, that notion of this permaculture and the imbalance, that it does seem that, in my experience, that if there is, let's say that there's an increase in drownings, what's going on there, what's the cause. We can put out more and more messaging and say, yeah, we got this video out there and we've done this, but the drowning rate's still going up. The videos are great, but we're not changing behavior. What's going on? What's the root cause of some of this? Whether it's the bugs and lack of turkeys, or jellyfish and lack of mola mola, or what is I reading the other day, that possums eat ticks. So, if you've got sea urchins destroying the kelp beds and there's no sea otters to eat the urchins, there's an imbalance. And maybe it's an imbalance that, as communities evolve and things change and develop, that maybe the pieces that are required to maintain that balance change. There's certain things that need to be introduced, or certain things that were left behind that were really kind of critical. I know that when I began working with the Department of Public Safety in American Samoa, the guys in the Marine Patrol and Fire, most of them had not had formal training in swimming, or much less, surf life-saving sports that are built around rescue skills. And I've worked with communities and lifeguards all over the world, from Australia to the East Coast to middle of the U.S. to American Samoa now. And it was really interesting to see that there was this, there was a drowning issue and no established rescue program and people in American Samoa. When I began working with that community of public safety officers and running these training sessions and everything, it was like something tapped into. I've never seen a group of individuals embrace and master skills and training I've never seen them embrace it with so much passion and become so much better in such a short period of time than my experience working with the American Samoans in the Department of Public Safety. It was staggering. Like, if we were doing a 1-hour training session, I couldn't get them out of the water after 2 hours. And I saw remarkable progress in short periods of time. And so I believe that the Samoan culture, there's a phrase called Fa'a Samoa, which means a Samoan way, which is focused on protecting family and village and ocean, that what had gotten out of balance, that there was a disconnect between keeping people safer in the ocean, was this. Once we began to reintroduce the skills and training that older Samoans had told me when they were growing up, oh, we swam more. We knew how to, tie floats together and float from one area to the next. And that had been lost. That it was an older generation that was sharing these stories of doing that.
Had it been lost because of just accidents and fear accumulating over? Like,
That's, having not done an actual study of some of the cultural
shift or whatever
pressures in that, but we did hear stories of drownings. And this is one impact that drownings or shark attacks can have, is people remember that story. And that story then becomes, while it might've been an isolated incident, it becomes repeated and becomes embedded in the story of, that's a dangerous piece of ocean.
Yep.
The ocean that I swam across when I went down there to do the swim, people were like, you're going to die there. It's sharks, it's dangerous. People told my wife that your husband won't survive, because probably at some point, and it might've been 10 years ago or 100 years ago, stuff must have happened, in that body of water. And so by going, okay, well, let's reestablish the balance. And the balance might have been a perspective switch, or the introduction of skills that might have been neglected or not, nurtured. And I think that also, when you look at this lack of access, so the introduction of new activities, whether it's different sports that pull you away from the ocean, or sitting inside and playing video games, or doing something else, where all of a sudden where normally everyone would have been in the ocean doing this stuff and fishing, and boats were lined up on the beaches all the time, that, those might have been, and this is just speculation, that there might have been social pressures from outside of the culture that, changed behavior.
The same reason kids aren't running around the neighborhood as much, because they've got these guys and are on TikTok or
Well, and then if I were sitting here doing this interview going, yeah, gotcha. Yeah, just a second. I mean, it's, we've shaped our own, kind of behavioral change and maybe lost the ability to interact face to face, eye to eye.
Yep. No, it's a world full of distractions. And
right.
And I think interestingly, like the necessity to focus, and one of the ways developing that is mindfulness meditation even, but as you were talking, you were saying like these kind of shifts in balance that they take place over time. There was like, because what you're doing is maintaining an equilibrium. You just look at like a pH balance and you go, you're it's kind of going back and forth and needs corrective. And if you have any say in that ecosystem or any controls or role to play in it, it takes constant attention. It takes equilibrium is not something that, there may be moments of balance where something can be somewhat static, but balance is never really static. It's a constant paying of attention. And when we take our eyes off the prize, so to speak, we can be all jellyfish, right?
Yeah.
So go back to Tennessee, was it?
Yeah.
Go back. Just talk to me about maybe your earliest memories of what you would call work.
It's actually thinking back at a story. So my first job, other than like cutting a neighbor's yard and being paid to do that, was working at a restaurant that was opening up. They bought a restaurant that had closed down, and I got hired as basically a laborer. To scrub pipes and clean everything up, a kitchen that had been abandoned for I don't know how long. And it was just brutal, toxic work. And, I thought that, I thought I was working hard. I thought I was, doing this, but I was, 17, 18, maybe a senior in high school. And I remember the guy that owned the restaurant that hired me, going, you're just not getting it done. You're just not working hard enough. We need more out of you. And my perception was, I am working hard, but to have someone else, who's, whether he was right or wrong, but I remember him going, we need you to work harder. This isn't getting it done. And I remember thinking, I will never have someone tell me that again. I will never have someone tell me again that you're not working hard enough. Yeah. And it flipped a switch. Maybe he was, older guy, he's got a 16, 17-year-old that he's going to, pressure into, not paying me anything. He's going to get more work out of me. Whatever it was, whether it was deliberate or I really wasn't doing the job, was irrelevant, because the switch that got flipped in me is, I'm not going to have someone tell me that I'm the guy that didn't work hard enough anymore. Because this was the same time in which I had discovered this love for endurance sports and everything, in which, working hard kind of necessitated success, at least if it was a finish line that you were trying to reach. And so that was probably my first paycheck. And no one was ever going to tell me that again.
It's interesting. Did you see, is the movie called All the Money in the World? Do you know that movie? I think it was, I forget the family's name. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I think it was DiCaprio. There's this scene where someone turns around, and it's funny because it so resonated with me, and I think it will with you, because so they say to this character, basically, you're lazy. And he just starts, he's like, I am not lazy. He's like, I might be stupid. Like he just rattles off all these like, here's a bunch of things you can say about me that may or may not be true, but you will never, never say that I'm lazy. And that, like, it was weird. I remember the scene in the movie, even not knowing like even which movie it was in, it like resonated so deeply in me. And I realized there's something like there's this idea I heard years ago, like you have like a kryptonite, like there's some idea you're like, this is the one thing you cannot say of me. And I hear that in what you're saying. Like it seems like that switch that gets flipped. It's like you feel like that was a set point for you. Like that was a moment in time that you're like, I'm still proving him wrong.
Yeah. I actually, I don't even know if I can remember the guy's name. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
it's not what's important.
a long time ago. And yeah, I think that, it's funny because you asked about work, and that's the work instance. And I also remember when I was, 13, 14, I was playing tennis,
Good.
and I had a coach and was with this kind of team at the local club, and uh, he would make us run in training, and I hated to run, just hated it. And he was just like, I I knew I was lazy, and he said, "You're just not working hard enough, and you've got to run, you've got to do this." And I remember physical fitness tests, when I was in elementary school, you had to run the 600 meters, whatever the president's physical fitness test thing was at the time, going, I can't do it. I remember like walking it. And now, here I am, I run 100 miles in 26 hours. And, I, I think there are a few people that have hit that kryptonite in me.
Yeah.
And everything I do is like, no, I'm not going to be the lazy one. But by the same token, you talk about being that balance in the system or balance in the
Yep.
person.
Yep.
If you're forever trying to prove that that's not true, you can throw yourself out of balance, because I will tell you, there's sometimes that level of drive can work against you. And that's where the mindfulness meditation can also come in. There are times when it's not necessarily being lazy, it's actually probably being productive, and recognizing that you cannot keep putting out that level of effort or focus, whether it's physical or mental, and not recharge. And so I
Yep.
have to be very diligent in not becoming what I say to others: don't be your own worst enemy. Don't become the thing that you have to overcome the most, regardless of whatever's outside of you.
Yeah, this is one of the ideas that I think is really interesting in the framework of like Judeo-Christian kind of, you're familiar with the idea of a Sabbath, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like work, 6 days, rest. But one of the things I really like about that framework, and I like the idea that rest emerges from work, that
Mm-hmm.
there's like the kind of rest you get at the end of a job well done. Like I did that. Now I'm done. And I'm going to watch Netflix, or I'm going to lay down, or I'm going to read a book, or whatever that activity is that's rest for you. And it ritualizes it, institutes it a little bit. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it's a good rhythm, a good advice. What is your rhythm? What is your rest? What does rest look like for you?
It's a really good question, because I actually am in, summer is a tough time for me, because I've got so many demands on time and what I'm doing that I don't have, and my wife will say that this is something that's going to really, something I need to work on. But rest right now um, is something I don't do well enough. And I recognize as I get older that rest and recharging becomes critically important. But also as we get older, we see all these other stressors, and we see all these other things that we need to do. And it's harder to just kind of put that aside. And I would say rest for me, because I'm in the public eye a lot, and I'm the guy in front of a lot of others directing it, that
Yep.
it's really kind of stepping away and focusing on myself. My little pockets of rest mentally are actually my physical stressors. So in the morning, I usually don't train with other people, because I need mentally to get away from others and just
Yeah.
kind of focus on how am I feeling and thinking, and not have that shaped by someone else. So, I spend a lot of time out on the water, relatively, or training by myself. And while
Yeah.
that's not rest physically, it's the mental rest that's probably more important. It seems like so much of what I do now is creative, or it's cerebral, that's what I need to step away from. Because if I can tell 3 or 4 days of just always being on and running programs and telling people this is what I need you to do, or coaching and working with others can be exhausting. And if I'm too depleted mentally to give that energy to others, then I'm worthless.
Yeah.
So rest for me still usually involves some sort of physical activity.
Yep.
But it's a mental kind of break, step away that kind of focuses me internally.
You know, I think, well, you do know this about me. I get up early in the morning and I do that, and I go work out, and kind of alone. I have a buddy that I meet often to go to the gym, but I relate a lot to what you're saying, where it's like physical exertion, but really, and I'm curious about you in this way. Would you say you're an introvert?
Yeah, I would say I'm very much an introvert.
Yeah.
I live a very extrovert life.
Yeah.
Yet if you knew me in high school, I was the smart kid. I wasn't in student government. I didn't play sports. I wasn't a leader in high school. I didn't perceive myself as that. I didn't put myself out there. I'm pretty introverted
Yeah.
and pretty self-reflective. And yeah, but yet you would think that, I'm on camera all the time. I'm on stage a lot, but it's not.
Yep. I'm very much an introvert. Now it's weird. When I was asking about temperament before, by the way, this is just, I thought just, it's incidental. You're in the ocean a lot, but you're familiar with ocean, the temperament scale, right?
Yeah.
Kind of. Anyway, I am, I don't know why I'm bringing that up other than, ocean. That's, so, but on that typology, I rank pretty high in extroversion, because they rank extroversion basically because I'm enthusiastic. So I am enthusiastic and I am outspoken. So I'll say what I think, and I'm full of enthusiasm. So I technically rank extrovert on a scale like that. But on a more day-to-day level, like talking to other people, I actually, this is my own way of framing this, I experience extroverts, people that I can watch gain energy from social interaction if I'm part of that, because I feel drained by it. Like I feel it happening as I'm doing what I do all the time, spending my life with other people, being drained by it. I consider extroverts vampires. Because, I mean, not as a way to put them down, just as the energy exchange that's happening is, I feel like I'm being taken from and I'm watching you grow. And there's a way in which there are times I interact with an extrovert and I go, I got to get out of here before they have all my energy.
Right.
But for me, getting up early in the morning actually was, the realization was, I thought I was a night owl, but it turns out I just need to be alone. And very similar to what you're saying, I think we have a lot in common in that way. It's like, yeah, I don't need to like sit still as much as I just need everything to be quiet for a minute.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never been, because it's funny, I grew up, private boys school. I mean, I'm just not, I went to a university where we had no fraternity sororities. I'm not a fraternity guy. I'm not the guy you're going to find out drinking with the guys. I don't do that. Like if I have to go to a social function where I'm in a crowd or put on a suit and do all that, I can talk and interact.
Play the game. Yep.
Do it. But it is probably the most uncomfortable I will feel. Drop me in 48-degree water 2 miles offshore, I'm pretty comfortable. Drop me with a bunch of people in Washington, D.C. at a policy meeting and I'm interacting and stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to try to find the wall to be a flower faster than anything if possible.
Yeah. I'm very similar. And I've been with you in settings where there was like schmoozing going on.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that we will just lock into one-on-one conversations, often with each other or across the room with someone else. But I can do one-on-one because it's closer to alone. Like, it's like I can share an exchange with you, but put me in like a mingle situation. I'm like, man, but it's work. It's when it's what's needed. You're like, yeah, you suck it up and you do it. But it's a lot like maybe like swimming through jellyfish. I don't know. It's like, yeah, I don't want to do this, but I can get through it.
But I can do it. And I tell people, maybe this phrase will resonate with you. I'm a person, not a people person.
Explain that.
I'm a person, not a people person. I am someone who likes that one-on-one, person-to-person connection.
Yep.
But you make me be a person in front of all these people, and I'm a little like, okay, I've got to, be on. I was a Rotary exchange student when I was in high school, so lived abroad in Australia for a year, and we used to talk about always putting on the Rotary smile. That at 16 or 17. We were always in meetings or at club events or whatever. We were always the one being noticed because we were the one outsider in usually a small community. So you just put on the smile and interact with everyone. And it was that I learned when I was 16 or 17 going, I'm very uncomfortable. I don't know the culture, community, people. I'm a long way from home, and I just need to find a way to be comfortable with it and smile and be part of it. So I learned how to be a person with people. But like you, I much enjoy, I need meaningful interactions. I need meaningful conversations. I love meeting someone for the first time and finding out how we're connected, finding out commonalities. You can drop me anywhere in the world, and that's what I'm going to thrive on, is trying to find that personal connection with someone. And going back to what we talked about before, how did I, develop the empathy, or how did I connect to, remote communities that I had nothing in common with, is I think being driven by that fascination of what is the connection here. Some Samoan guy that had a very, very different life than me. What's something we have in common, and how do we find that? Because I think if we find that, if more of us are driven by finding the commonalities, then that's where the opportunity for sustainable positive change comes from. I went to Poland a couple of years ago to work with their surf lifesaving community, and did a bunch of talks and visited a lot of schools and spoke to a lot of people. Poland, never even thought about going there. But within 2 weeks, I felt like I was Polish. I just was so fascinated with the individuals and the culture and the community, and just walked in there going, I've no expectations, never been here before, but what can I just lose myself into discovering about how we're related and how we're linked.
Can you tell me about a time that fell flat, like that you missed the mark, so to speak, in the connection process with a new people group that you were introduced to?
There have been instances in which probably, if it fell flat, if it was part of the job or the mission that we needed to make these connections, I needed to develop it. There are times where I thought this is just not working. Actually, in American Samoa, the first time I went down there, I remember going in with this, having never been there before, this first time I'd ever been, and within 24 hours of being there, having to go and speak at a high school. And so I'm the only Palangi, non-Samoan in the group, not speaking Samoan. And, I had done talks other places, but I'm like, it felt to me like it just fell flat. And I'm like, I was hung up on what I thought I needed to do and be, rather than being a little bit more fluid with the experience and then reading it better. And I adjusted, and, but I remember feeling personally like, I totally did not, I missed that. I didn't know. I just didn't know. And I think that, but I've also, it's very uncomfortable. It's like watching one of those, movies on TV or romantic comedies where the guy does something, you're going, it just physically hurts, going, I can't believe they did that. It's so embarrassing. And, I kind of, I've had that experience so many times. I mean, that comes to mind. Feeling like I just was a complete outsider going, what in the world can I possibly share? What in the world do I possibly have in common to be here? Why am I here? And, but it also passed, and I just stuck with it. And I think putting aside ego and go, you know what? I don't know enough yet to do this, but that doesn't mean I'm not the right person to still fight for this cause or fight for this change that we want to see made.
There's a real theme in a lot of these stories that there's something, I mean, whether it's the ocean or entering into a different culture, that is some trepidation, some anxiety around things, but then a humility and a kind of a stick-to-itiveness, just to like, I didn't leave. Right. And I stayed in the water. I stayed with the people, because how easy it'd be to walk away with your head hanging and go, I failed, or I can't, or and just, so good job. And thanks for modeling that. Cause I imagine with a lot of the folks that you coach and mentor, that's like, it's maybe one of the most primary needed traits. It's like, yeah, don't go away. You can figure this out. Right. It's sticking around, and there's a bit of resilience and grit in that story that I think, like, man, to me, it's becoming like a core personality, like a pursuit, like a value to pursue and to hope to train people in. Now, because you mentor and coach, and we got onto you being a bit introverted because I asked you about rest, and rest was I experienced rest as like some sort of isolation or some solitude, time alone. So the importance of rest in physical feats, right? So you train physically, and like if you lift a bunch of weights, you need to rest so those muscles to recover. That's kind of, how that works physically. And typically I find that like that's an easier way to think about rest, right? Where you're like, oh no, I know exactly what it does. And yet you have a hard time. It sounds like you've struggled to translate that over to the day-to-day, the mental, the grind. You're like, no, I'm working, but in a similar way, you go, yeah, it will take it out of you. Like, you can't just do curls every single day forever and never let that recover. And yet we kind of sometimes fall into the trap of doing exactly that with the weights we're lifting in our lives, right? Whether that be relational or missional, or, the purpose we're grinding after, because we are captivated by a calling or a purpose or whatever. And it's like, you want to give yourself fully to that thing, but part of that is sharpening your sword, right? Like stopping for a minute and getting your tools in order. Talk to yourself, I guess, for a minute, like as though as you click into mentoring, like, just like, what would you tell a young man that you were working with that was doing that physically?
I would say, and it's probably the most important thing to me, is that more opportunities and more things have opened up to me, not by proving to everyone how strong I was, but by allowing people to see vulnerability. Because that, if you're caught up on just being the invincible one that no one can ever beat, or I think that accepting and embracing those points of vulnerability, when you're not trying to prove that you can do these curls or these push-ups or these swims and go on and on and on and be invincible and you're stronger than everyone else. I can't identify with that. And I think that the person that presents that is not being probably honest with himself. I mean, I've been in this world a long time, in this endurance sports world. And if you will get your bell rung. I mean, I've finished races and ended up in the hospital. I have been by physical finish line measures defeated. And the vulnerability is where the strength lies, or the response to the vulnerability. And that's something that I think that has become more important for me to kind of embrace and recognize as I've gotten older, because my body can't do the same thing it did 30 years ago. That I work with that. I accept that as kind of part of the process, whether it's the rest or the downtime or not being the strongest, but not letting that mean that I failed. Like when I failed to connect, with that group, it wasn't about me.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I didn't fail. I might have misread something. I didn't recognize something. I didn't have the knowledge base yet. But, we go back to knowledge means desire. I had the passion to make that change, but maybe I didn't have the knowledge I needed to really implement it at that time. So now I'm going to go out and try to find that knowledge, find that person that can help me fill that gap. Because part of the time too, like you've got a passion for the community that you're working to serve in Tampa. I have a passion for the community in American Samoa, and I'll be down there and I'll have great connections. And all of a sudden I leave and I'm going, wait, what did I miss here? And how do I get this to keep going? That I think that, I say that if I can't do it, or with our passion, if we can't do it, who else is? Because when the work gets hard, that passion is going to drive you, and that commitment and that why is going to drive you to kind of find those answers to what you need. And, really, if I wasn't vulnerable, if I didn't fail at certain times, I wouldn't recognize where those gaps are. If I think that I can do it all myself and I can swim forever and ever, I'm not going to go looking for something to make me stronger, or for the means to do something better or accomplish more or have a larger, broader impact in a demographic community. It's the vulnerability that is going to show me where the gaps are in my skills and the program skills of the initiatives we're putting out, or in my own foundation.
You mentioned before the idea of a flow state, and that, there's talk of flow state and athletes click into flow state. I know you're super familiar with that. Isn't one of the, let's say, triggers or states within which one might enter into flow something I'm hugely fascinated with? Isn't that doing something beyond your capacity? Isn't there a way in which, there's kind of like a sweet spot, I believe, in I don't know, tackling something where it's like, if this is just easy, it's boring, right? Like I won't lock in it, and it can't be so like waves is a great example. I actually think I used it in a recent conversation, because I went surfing a lot when I was younger. And when I hear you tell these stories of the ocean and the impact, I'm like, oh yeah. So I may have told you this once, but let me share this. I went to Witch's Rock in Costa Rica. Okay. And I had we found a guy with a boat, and we rented some surfboards. And cause I had complained, like we were at like a normal, like touristy beach. And I was like, this sucks. These waves are nothing. They're bigger waves in Florida, like complaining. And I was like, yo, take me somewhere with real waves. Someone introduced me to this guy, and he took me in a boat to Witch's Rock. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's kind of a known spot. And at certain times, there are times of the year you can drive to it, but in the wet season, it's a peninsula sometimes, but it's an island at other times. Mm-hmm. So we get in this boat, and he travels out with me and some friends, and we go out in this boat with our surfboards. And when we're picturing, we had people with us that weren't surfing, just going, hey, we're going to lay on the beach. And he brought us up, and we didn't go to the island, because he's like, I can't take a boat to the island. Are you crazy? Like, I'm going to sit out here in the water, and you can jump in and swim into the waves. So we're like, oh, okay, cool. Sorry, guys that came to lay on the beach. I mean, you can swim up there if you want. Yeah. So they're sitting in a boat getting seasick. So we jump in, and we go over these waves, which it's weird. It's like from behind, I was clueless.
Yeah, they don't look that big when you're on the outside. Yeah.
As soon as I came over the lip, in my mind, I was 6 stories up. It wasn't, but the only other boat there, and this should have been a clue, was professional surfers from Japan that were there practicing. And we pulled up in a boat next to them. I've surfed just in Florida East Coast. I'm not really a surfer, right? I'm just out dorking around. I'm on vacation, overweight, just rent a surfboard. And I tried to drop in. in what was, I mean, I think realistically 16 feet. And I was absolutely crushed and just washed and washed and washed. And I was like, oh, it's the end of my life. And then I was just on the sand. And then I couldn't, that was it. I was like, there's no surfing. And the rest of the day was, I can't get back to the boat, like with my surfboard. Like I could swim out with no surfboard, but I rented the surfboard and I need to bring it back. I finally did make it through, but I use that as an analogy because of this flow state idea, because there are things that is like, this is too easy. It's boring. But then if it's so much, it's going to kill you. That's not a good idea. But there's like a sweet spot where it's like, I know that I can do this, so I need to strive to do that. And the reason I'm bringing this up is you were talking about the benefit of failure. And you're like, if I always was accomplishing my goals, I would just have to ask, like, do you have goals that are stretching you or growing you in any way? Because I almost would say that I think failure is a marker of, it's like, what is it in baseball? It's like you just need 3 out of 10 to be like a 3, whatever the batting average is, like to be like Hall of Fame level batter or whatever. Yeah, exactly. It's like, and so just the importance of pushing yourself beyond what you can do. And I appreciate you kind of centralizing and highlighting the value of failure and vulnerability and pushing yourself, kind of putting yourself in places that are uncomfortable, which it seems like you've made an entire career of doing.
Well, it's interesting too, because you talk about that flow state and allow us to do something that is what we might think is beyond us. And we've experienced that. But then I also feel, because I deal with people's safety so often, and in the ocean, I think that, I also feel that one of the most dangerous campaigns that's ever been successful is just do it. Because I will tell you, there are some times you should not just do it. So you dropping on that 16-foot wave, it doesn't matter how much you're flowing. If you don't,
no, I was going to die.
If you don't have the knowledge and experience to survive that,
was horrible.
It'll be the last time you flow. It'll be flow and then flow under. And I think, the movie Free Solo. I've done a little bit of climbing, but I'm not going to go free solo El Cap, no matter how much I meditate and tap into that flow state. I don't have the skill set.
That's right.
Don't have, like, that's that knowledge means desire as well. So I think that the flow state allows us to kind of keep pushing that envelope, or to be
just a little bit though, like a little bit.
And you have breakthroughs, but the guy that's having this breakthrough and set a world record in, say, the long jump, he probably didn't start jumping the day before.
That's right.
Michael Jordan or someone like that doesn't hit the flow state at an NBA championship without playing a couple of basketball games before that.
That's right.
So I think that those two, and this is not based on anything but anecdotal, my own personal experience, that you need to temper a desire to just do it with tapping into, being at peace and good decision making in the moment, but also the development of skill. I do a talk a lot about, and Nike had an initiative in which they were trying to break the 2-hour marathon record. And they removed all the variables. They set these athletes up on the equipment they were using, the training regimen. They were on a laser guided course around a track that was pancake flat at just the right temperature to see if they could do 2 hours. And, it's pretty easy. If you want to run a 2-hour marathon, there's one thing you need to do. And I don't remember what the math is. You've got to run a sub 5-minute mile. That's it. I can tell you, if you want to run a 2-hour marathon, and forgive me, whoever's listening, I'm not doing the math in my head, but it's this. If you want to run a 15-minute 5K, very straightforward. You need to run a 450 mile.
Yep.
But it doesn't matter how much you can be at peace with that 450 mile. If your body's not trained to do it, it's just not going to happen.
Now that 2 hour, I'm interested in this, that 2-hour marathon, they did it.
They actually missed by 45 seconds.
Has it? So is that the current record on that? As far
because this was not on a recognized marathon course, it was all, there was no doping or anything illegal, but it
was too catered.
Was specific. It was catered just to that. And they basically just wanted to look at, could it be done? Kind of when Roger Bannister was trying to break the 4 minute.
I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah. Bannister, what was it? Within 2 weeks of Bannister doing it, people started doing it left and right.
It's insane.
They just wanted to see if it was possible. So now all of a sudden you throw that carrot out there and they're like, okay. Yeah.
So that's a fascinating, they call it the Bannister effect now. It's like, that's a super fascinating idea because it was impossible. Like, it was like, yeah, it can't be done. And as soon as it was done regularly. Became a standard almost. And I constantly think about that when we think about doing the impossible. And so that's why I was really intrigued with this idea of like, what is the record of that? Did they break it? And then have people been doing that since?
It was, there's a documentary, I think it's on Netflix. I don't remember exactly when it took place. There's a great book called Endurance, in which the author actually was involved in that, from covering it from a journalist perspective.
Yeah.
They went under 201. I don't know exactly.
I'm gonna look that up. That's awesome.
Right now, but it's flirting with that. I think the record right now on a course in a race is 202, just under that, somewhere near there. So it's close. It's very close.
Hey, when you did that swim, where were you? The bay?
Monterey Bay. Yeah.
Monterey Bay. Do you have footage of that coming out of the water, and is that posted?
Oh yeah, actually, there is a series of YouTube interviews that the film festival recorded of me talking to the reporters. It's there. I actually ran across it the other day looking at it. So there's a short little 3-minute piece of it, but then the interviews that I did when I stood up on the beach are, they're on YouTube. I think if you look up Bruckner Chase, Monterey Bay, Blue Film Festival, they'll
perfect.
It's like a two-parter. Yeah.
Perfect, man. I just started doing this podcast thing, and I still am trying to figure out like where to put those show notes and stuff. But if I could find that and drop that in, or even splice in some clips of you sharing at the end of that, I think that'd be super cool to share. What is you mentioned a few times as we were talking, like redefining success. Or like maybe even in process, like success, because I like the way you were doing this too. You were like, what was success in that situation? What was success in that situation? And maybe even in a situation, I redefine success. What is success? Like just as a
global.
Yeah.
Geez, that's a really thought-provoking question. And I think that what immediately comes to mind is there are layers to that. So you can ask someone, did you live a successful life in the end? Did you lead a successful life? And, for me, that definitely won't be measured by how much money's in the bank. That ship sailed. But I think if you look at across a lifetime or an extended period of time, success would be, did I positively impact the communities or the people or the things that I touched? Was I able to positively impact what I came across? And I think that, when you look at a specific, you talk about logic models for business schools and, social scientists looking at, we just launched this wave safety series with NOAA, and success in that will be defined by, they may look at it, we were successful if we have 25 million people view the videos. Well, that's great, but I joked in a meeting just last month. I'm like, well, if we want to hit 50 million views, let's put a kitten in it, because everyone likes kitten videos, and they'll just share it and it'll go viral. But really, if you're putting out a film series about protecting people from drowning and being safe in around the ocean, success is, did we change one person's behavior and they lived?
Mm-hmm.
But is it one person, or is it 10 people, or 100? I would suggest that success may be driven by the entity or the individual that needs something from that success. And need might be a financial reward. So impressions count. It might be, some sort of fulfillment, because they're charging up their passion to do this work based on someone saying, this really changed my life. So is success one person who earned his bike now has a job away from the shop and is able to positively impact his life and friends and family that are part of his life as well? Is that one person, that's success for him? But it's interesting that one individual might say, this was a success. My life is a success because of what Jon and Well Built allowed me to do. But while he would say that is the ultimate success, it changed my life, is that one person's ultimate success enough to say Well Built is successful?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I think a lot about this question. So it makes it worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I kind of think of, I often think of like getting out of this tool everything that can be gotten out of it. That's maybe one way of thinking about success, right? Is kind of like, what do I have in, like, actualizing potential,
Mm-hmm.
maybe something like that. Wow, you turned that back a little bit. So also, I guess it's a success. It's funny. So I've worked with folks on the streets for a long time, and
Mm-hmm.
I have been resolutely not uninterested, but like results and fruit cannot be central. Now, it's funny because if you try to fundraise, it's central, or if you need to be, and honestly, looking at results matters, because it could just be you're doing this very poorly, right? But for me, there was a guy, I'll tell you a story. There was a man that he lived on the streets. He was very large, heavy man.
Mm-hmm.
He had been on the streets for some time. He had some kind of personality, like he was a smart dude, a good dude, but maybe had some personality traits that made him a little abrasive at times, and he didn't maybe say play well with others all the time. And so he was socially isolated, as a lot of folks on the streets are, and had some struggles. And so the Well and the work that the Well is doing grew out of a little community called the Lake House. And I talked a bunch of dudes into living together and just saying, hey, we got a house we should share. Like, there's a bathroom, a shower. And so we started opening our doors to people. And this guy was one of those people. And we got to know him over the years, and we walked with him and really knew his story. And he actually stayed with us for a little while, was sleeping on our couch, and he introduced us to a few other people on the streets that we got really close to. A few of them moved in with us, actually. And I just saw this guy last week, and it had been a while. I hadn't seen him in a while. He's a taxi driver now. But he was, at the time, there was some Voc rehab money or grant that he was going to be able to get some training. And he's like, look, I'm physically, like, I'm large, but I can drive. And so he went to trucker school and got a CDL, started becoming a trucker or whatever. But that story actually it's not some great success story with air quotes, like the way that, and now
Mm-hmm.
he's doing whatever. And it's like, no, he's still struggling. And I think, even in the cab, I'm not sure he has a place to go when he clocks out. I think he stays in the cab, and he has struggled at times, and it wasn't a great success. But when I reflected on the story and my own assessment of our work, I was like, because along the way, like, so I think someone asked, like, is this a success story? And I was like, it was a success story when we became friends. That was it. Like, it's weird, but my measure of success in those interactions was friendship. It's like, yeah, we have mutual respect. There's no project here. Like, it doesn't matter if he gets on his feet or not, but like, it's a relational, there's a deep relational component to this, which is why even after years, like, we just reconnected the other night, but it was, hey, old friend, like, what's up? Let's catch up. Let's, grab dinner. And yeah, he still struggles. And I think will forever, possibly. And I respect he keeps getting up. He keeps trying. He keeps working at it, I don't know if this is directly answering your question, but it is a way in which I go, no, like, it's an odd way, but like, there is something about relationship that is, success is related to your aims, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, I can't fix anyone's life. I can't fix my own life. I could just try really hard and try to be good and try to be loving and walk with folks. Right. So I often define what we do as walking with people or riding bikes with people.
And I've heard you refer to that. And I think that it's been interesting for me because you asked me when this changed, when I switched. Monterey Bay was 2010 when I did that. So that's, roughly 9 years of completely reinventing my life and what I do. And I think I spent a professional career for decades working for publicly traded billion-dollar companies where success was pretty well defined. It's
bottom line.
This is the bottom line. And I don't remember in many of those years, many people going, well, how do you feel about this new store? How do you feel about our sales this month or this week? They didn't care. And I think that I'm facing a high school reunion in a month. And I have a lot of classmates that, live on a golf course, and they have a lot of measures of success. And most of them, I don't know. I can't speak to whether they're happy, fulfilled, don't know. But if you just look at bank accounts and stuff, then for most people that's successful. And I know that I always struggle when I go back to that environment, that I question myself, going, I'm not successful. I can't afford to go to dinner where you're going, much less, have some of that. And I think that that's another kryptonite thing with me, that I'm like, what does success look like? Because, I also had it, my family also kind of, that was important. That was the environment I was kind of put in, that you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer and you're going to do this, this, and this. And I am way off the path on that one. And yet it's interesting because I've had a couple of friends reach out to me recently, and they go, I've been doing this, I've been making this kind of money, and I don't feel I'm worth anything.
Yep.
And I'm going, okay, so now what I need to do is, as I get older, find this balance between, I don't want to feel like I'm not worth anything, but I also have the reality of, I need to be secure. I need to be able to take care of myself and put food, and, so, the friendship starts there, but having a vehicle to drive and earn a living, having a roof or a shower or fresh water to drink, whatever it might be.
It matters.
Yeah. So the friendship is a success, but then in day-to-day life, you need to not die because you died from exposure because you didn't have a place to go to get warm, or you didn't have food or medical treatment or access to that. I don't know if we could really definitively answer success is this one thing, unless it's the ability to fulfill the need that is most important at that moment.
Yeah, I like that. And it's why I like this question, because I don't think we can definitively, and everybody's been answering it different. And I think that's a really good summation of that journey. And you're right. There is a balance like that which, by the way, you say like, well, because of the measures of success that people have in terms of money, or you're like, and I can't go out to dinner, but then you also reference, you have people call you and say, I make all this money, but feel empty. And I just think back to the two W's. Well, the first of the W's is why, and you saying to chase the thing that has purpose. And it is, in some sense, the narrative of your own story is like you've been, whether given to or captivated by some sort of a calling and purpose toward what you've given your life to. And it wasn't being a doctor or having a lot of money, or, it's, and in the end, you hold like someone with a lot of money calling someone without a lot of money, saying, how is it that you have meaning and purpose, that you're thriving, though you can't go to dinner or whatever? I can do whatever I want. And this was my experience. This was a huge pivot point for me. So you referenced that point in time for you. I was already kind of like, I had come to a place where I wanted to learn. I had come to a conviction. I need to learn from the poor, that there's a wealth, what I've called the wealth of the poor, that I need to learn from. I had like seen glimpses of it. And I figured out a way through an organization that I was a part of and working with to get some time in the slums of Manila in the Philippines. And I remember going there and sleeping in these slums with the host family that had me there. And it, it's not like I was young. It's not like I have anything like comparatively in our society, right? Just poor college student. Mm-hmm. However, in this part of the world, it's very clear. Like I have everything. I have absolutely everything. I got a roof over my head, running water, air conditioning. Like it's incredible the wealth that we live in and take for granted. And yet I had this overwhelming sense of jealousy while I was there, that I was like, I've never known joy like this, like I see. I've never known connectedness and community like I'm encountering here. I've never seen hospitality like I'm encountering here. And I would say that all of my life and convictions around community, grace, hospitality, innovation, repurposing what we otherwise consider waste, because that's what the innovative use of what I would call trash was one of the things that like I couldn't shake. And when I left that place, I was like, how is it that I can be in like a place where I have comparatively everything and am overwhelmed with jealousy? And it was because they are wealthy, but they don't have physical stuff or a lot of physical stuff comparatively, but they have the spiritual stuff or they have the deeper stuff. And I, in some sense, that was a moment in time where everything changed for me when I came home. And it's how I ended up moving into a community with a bunch of people. I said, well, over there, they all live in one house. So come on in, y'all. Let's all live together, and we started transforming and changing our minds about what we were using. And it was for me a trajectory shift where it was like, I want to live and walk with the poor. I want to learn to share. I want to know community and ingenuity and stop wasting so much. And it's weird, but like there's ways in which, I don't know, that wealth, it isn't the things that we're pointing to. It isn't the ability to go buy dinner. And it is the reason that someone might call you and say, hey, tell me about what you have that isn't what I have. And I want to circle back. I know we're coming up on the end of time here. Have you ever read Man's Search for Meaning?
No, I don't think so. I think you've mentioned this once before, but I don't think I have.
It's an important book to me, but Viktor Frankl was a
Yes, you did tell me about this. I have not read it, but yeah, I remember you mentioning this before.
So throw it on the list, but he lived in 4 concentration camps. And one of the, just like a central reflection, he's like, look, in the concentration camps, there was a lot of people that were brought in. They were good Jews, good neighbors, just decent folks. But then they were put into these extreme circumstances. And you saw some people turn into the devil and some people turn into like angels. And he became fascinated with the question of what it was that differentiated. Like, why? Because some people became like you were in the first swim, bitter, resentful, angry, and would do whatever it took to survive. Became ugly. And then other people became selfless and grateful and giving, holy even. Something like an encounter with God. He said he would witness like angelic presence among these people. He's like, but when they came in, they were like, just like anyone else, all of them. There's nothing special about any of these people necessarily.
Right.
But it was revealed by the circumstances. And so he developed this whole therapy in psychiatry called logotherapy, but it was like in Man's Search for Meaning is that it's the therapy that is meaning and purpose. And he says like at a central place, freedom, like human freedom is, so you had around talking about meditation, you had said about, look, my reaction, like my ability to decide my reaction is what matters. Like when I'm in a life and death situation, I need to be able to control or have some intentional response around my emotional controls, because it could be life or death, right? But the same thing could be true in a social setting. The same thing could be true when you're on stage. And and he actually would say like so this is a kind of a quote, I'm probably not exactly right. The last bastion of human freedom is the capacity to respond. He's like, you can be totally captive and put in a cage, but no one can take from you the capacity to respond. Like what you do in any circumstance is always within your control. And that, and I just think like around something like, even as you share about meaning and purpose and how that's guided you through life rather than a pursuit of wealth or the bottom line and the pursuit of something good and holy or holistic in the world, and your own developing of your own capacity to determine your own response. It seems like that's been a really meaningful and worthwhile pursuit. And I think that you doing that has been a model to me and those that have the privilege of knowing you. Thank you for that. And then I guess to like, I know we got to come to wrap up. I want to ask you, I don't know if you have any thoughts or want to respond to that in any way. And then also just anything that you want to like let people know you're working on or that they should look up or find. It's not like there's a million people listening to this, but who knows in time, right?
Right. I think that I don't want to say much because I don't want to take away from the note that I just made, which is the capacity to respond. You know, I'm dealing with some health issues with my wife, and it changes what's important.
Yeah, that's right.
So what does success look like at the end of this week? For her to not be in pain would be success.
Yeah.
And that's not really a success that I can do much to achieve. And I think that if we wrap up with the capacity to respond and then make the next choice from whatever might be there, social, physical, sport, job, capacity to respond. I think that, and just to say, what we're doing, I mean, we're focused on ways to personally connect people. We've got the 3 words on that bracelet: passion, strength, and vision. How do we enable in others the passion to care, the strength to act, and the vision to inspire? The trappings of what that might look like. Right now we've got this Wave Safe series with NOAA, in which we're trying to implement ways to empower people to protect themselves and others in and around coastal environments. But we also, are trying to let people kind of see what role they can play in positively impacting other things: passion, strength, vision. Because whatever it might be, and I have spent a lot of time like you walking with others, but that allows me to have empathy, but I'm still not them. So the capacity to respond. And I think sharing that and then giving people the knowledge and means to match up with their desire to shape how they respond, and give them opportunities to drive a cab or to ride a bike to a job or to feel fulfilled, even if they might be making $500,000 a year and something's missing, because that person's suffering.
Yep.
As well.
It's a form of poverty that we don't often consider poverty. but it's a different kind of captivity. And it's one that would help the rich and the poor to know they have something deeply in common.
Yeah. And my experience, when you talk about the Philippines, I reflect back on American Samoa is a relatively significant portion of the population is below the poverty level. And if you walk into the villages, and it pains me when people describe it, oh, it's a third world country. It pains me.
Sure.
Because they do not recognize the strength and richness in a culture and a community that's been there for 3,000 years. But at the same time, I can walk into villages and walk into schools and see things that by other people's measure, they don't have.
Sure.
But I've never seen smiles. I've never felt friendships and openness and sharing like I have in communities like that, where you would not necessarily expect it.
We have a lot to learn there.
Yeah. And I think that, not that there aren't struggles and everything, but there is a peace and openness and fulfillment definitely in not, quote, having anything.
Man, thank you so much for your time. I love you, Bruckner. Yeah. Appreciate you, man.
Yeah. Aloha. Faftai.
I wish I could repeat that back. I will, we'll catch up soon offline, man.
All right. Take care. This has been great, man. All right.
Thanks, brother.
Talk to you soon. Yep.
Yes, sir.